And to continue the discussion, I have with me Imesh Liyanage. Imesh, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Sujit. It was a great
Right?
first episode. Hopefully, a better second one.
Yes, of course. I mean, this is not the only one we're going to be doing. So we're going to
Yeah,
have this plus another three more, where we are actually trying to break this into different episodes so that it's easier for our viewers to comprehend this huge topic, why it is important subject as part of the security strategy. Imesh, I mean, we got a context of why attack surface management in the first episode. I'd like you to delve a little deep and talk us through what it means to identify and map the attack surface. Imesh?
sure, Sujit. So mapping, as we spoke about in the first episode, is the first step, and this has to include not just things that you directly control, but also things like your cloud infrastructure, which might not be under your control. There could be services that you're using, like SaaS services. There could be your suppliers, anyone who's integrated into your supply chain, and could be people like third-party app developers or third-party maintenance personnel who have access to your systems. Basically, any party that has access to your systems is a part of your attack surface because you can be breached through them. So you have to include all of that in your mapping, right?
So,
And
Imesh,
once
if I
you,
may interrupt you.
yeah,
So, in other words, what
sure.
we are saying here is we are talking about the supply chain as well as the third parties, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Continue, Imesh.
So once you now know who's a part of your attack surface, and you can use modern attack surface management tools to help you monitor these, and then we build that inventory. You should then go one step further and identify what's running on these assets, right? What are the ports that are open? What subdomains, host names are connected to these servers or endpoints? What vulnerabilities are on these endpoints? Are there any misconfigurations? Are there expired certificates, weak security certificates? Are any products in your attack surface end of life with no support? And as a part of this, you can also check, if there is a issue that's open in your attack surface, how long is it open for? How long does it take for you to find it and take it down? Also, is there any of your employees or your customers' data or credentials that have been leaked somehow in a separate breach? Is that available out there in the dark or deep web? So that's all. That's sort of the level that you need to go to in ASM to identify what is actually in your attack surface. So then after the initial mapping, that's your sort of second step.
Okay, go
And
ahead. Go ahead.
from there, where we would go is to identify what are the risks that are associated with all these vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, breaches that are in your attack surface. And then you have to do your usual risk and threat modeling to understand what threats target my organization. These ransomware gangs or these APT groups are known to target this region, are known to target this industry. In which case, do you have anything in your attack surface that they usually look for? Right?
Okay.
So you need to bring all of that in. And if you do have those, either take it down, put it behind a VPN, use some sort of SASE solution. Those are all different set of options that you can take. And finally, what you need to do is figure out how you're going to collaborate. Cybersecurity is always a team sport, and you need to make sure that anything that you discover in your attack surface, does your SOC know about it? Have they installed sensors to even log things on these assets that are exposed? Is it linked to your SIM? Is your SIM filtering for these known vulnerabilities in your attack surface? Are your procurement teams aligned? Are they making sure that the suppliers you're onboarding are vetted for security before they can be integrated into your networks. So all of those are sort of things that we need to worry about when we're sort of building an ASM strategy.
I have a couple more follow-up questions, right? So you said
Sure.
discover, identify services, identify vulnerabilities, and you also mentioned security is a team sport, right? I'm just going to ask you, I won't say it's a difficult question. I'm going to ask you an interesting one. So team sports, you have, I mean, if you take cricket is very hot, right? I mean, right now, I think everybody's talking about the IPL World Cup, following the IPL. You have a playing 11. You have substitutes. And then you have the rest of the players in the team. They don't play. They're there. So you have a coach, you have support staff, all of them. So my question in the context of cybersecurity, do you only monitor which is in the production, or would you also monitor what is in the production but limited to which is critical?
That's a good way to put it. So critical assets internally, of course, would require the most amount of protection. But when you look at it from an external perspective, even if you have something that's non-critical, but has an attack path to a critical asset, it can still be important, right? And we see this a lot, especially when you have development environments, which may be open to the public because your clients need to access it, or they didn't bother to put it under VPN before you can access the UAT environment or the dev environment. But the issue is in the dev environment, you might have certain logs enabled which store credentials. You might be using sample data sets that are not sanitized in these environments. So in when you're looking at from, let's say, data privacy perspective, that data, if it's not sanitized, even if it's 6-month-old customer data, you're still liable for protecting it. But if you're not putting the same level of safeguards that you do into your production systems into your dev environment, but you have them publicly exposed, that still represents a major attack vector for your organization.
Right.
Does that
Thank you for clarifying.
answer the
Yes,
question?
you
Yeah.
clarified it. I mean, I'm just asking on behalf of the viewers, right? So what is important? Is everything important? I mean, I remember you also mentioned in the opening episode where you said anything accessible by a user where you're trying to deliver service can be subject to an attack. So which means you cannot differentiate between critical and non-critical, essential, non-essential. Everything out there has to be discovered and monitored for attack surface. One last question for this episode, Imesh. Right, you did talk about modern tools. Right, so you briefly mentioned the word modern. How is attack surface management using technologies like artificial intelligence? Is that being put into use? How do you see
Yeah,
this?
for sure. So attack surface management, by definition, it's an unbounded sort of problem, right? You don't know where some assets are. So where AI really helps is to identify things that might not have a direct link to your organization,
Mhm.
but could be somehow linked to, right? Like, for example, if you use the third-party developer to build an application for you, it might be their name in the App Store, but it's still your application. Or there might be a data breach of 100 of your customers' passwords that use your service, or maybe let's say their online banking credentials. So identifying that for a human is quite difficult, but when you apply AI and machine learning and natural language processing to these problems, then we're able to gather a lot more intelligence and make it a lot more actionable to you without having you crunch all that data. So that's one way that ASM uses it, and there's a few other ways as well. I think you had a question. I can dig into that after that.
Sure. I mean, if you want to give other
Yeah,
use cases, please go ahead.
yeah. So one way that we particularly use it is when we discover vulnerabilities or potential vulnerabilities in the attack surface. We also connect to our vulnerability intelligence database, and that employs AI quite heavily to understand what are the threats associated with this vulnerability, what ransomware is targeting it, what malware is built to exploit it, or even is it exploitable in the first place? Are there exploits available for it in the on the web, whether it's a publicly available one or available in the dark web? Um, and we also use AI heavily to make predictions. If a vulnerability is not being exploited right now, when do we predict that it'll become exploitable? So rather than look at your attack surface and be overwhelmed with the number of vulnerabilities that you might find there, we're able to tell you, these are dangerous now. These are not particularly dangerous at the moment, but we'll tell you if they become dangerous. And also, this will become dangerous in the future because of what we've seen before, and this is what our prediction is. So that's one large space where we are employing AI. One is to aid with discovery, the other one is to aid with prediction intelligence.
A couple of takeaways from this episode is that I see is that you cannot prioritize or you cannot say this is critical and that is not critical. You need to have an inventory of all products and services running on your environment. You should be able to discover because all of them can be an attack surface because it is accessible for some service or some delivery of service. The second thing that I'm hearing is that it is humanly impossible to do a detection of vulnerabilities, maybe 100%, or even discover sensitive information which is probably leaking or has leaked and has probably potentially leaked to the dark web. So it is easier to deploy tools, modern tools with capabilities where you can even train the models to capture that data and report it back to you. Maybe even tell you what precautions or preventive actions that you should initiate as a first step. So Imesh, thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation on this subject of attack surface management. So I'd like to let the viewers know that the next episode, we will be talking two important things. You did briefly talk about vulnerability intelligence, but I would also want to have a conversation with you to understand, is there a difference between threat intelligence and vulnerability intelligence? So viewers, look forward to our next episode. And if you have missed the first episode, please look out for the videos in the YouTube channel. Imesh, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for the next episode.
Thanks, Sujit.